Welcome everyone to Trail Talks, the International Trail Running Association's podcast series. I'm your host, Stephanie Case, and today I'm speaking to you from the Middle East. Today we have on Lucy Bartholomew, who's calling in from Australia. So first, a bit about Lucy. She's 27 years old, but has already been ultra running for over a decade. I'm going to let that sink in as you do the math in your heads. And I could probably spend the next hour just talking about her accomplishments. I think some of her most notable achievements include third place at Western States in 2018, first at the 100K Ultra Trail Cape Town, after which she completed the Ironman World Championships in Kona for shits and giggles. She's a Salomon athlete and has a list of sponsors that would probably make most of us drool. I also want to say she is a trail coach. But before we start, I do have a confession. Lucy is on the podcast for very selfish reasons. I've been dying to just hop on a call and chat away with this woman for some time. And Trail Talks is really just giving me an excuse. So forgive me if I forget that all of you listeners are out there. This one is for me. Lucy, warm welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. And I could not think of a better way to wrap up the week, the working week Friday in Australia than talking to you. So thank you for having me on.
It's great. Now, you just came back from the Salomon camp where they brought together athletes from the team from all around the world. And, you know, I've been to one of their Salomon academies before, not the Top Athlete Summit, but it was, let's call it a baby athlete or athlete in training summit. And I have to say it was a lot of fun, but it was pretty intense. Can you just tell us about the week, who was there, where did you go, and what did a typical day look like?
Yeah, totally. So I actually started at one of those baby camps. So I was at the Junior Salomon Academy back in 2015. I was, how old was I? Like 16 years old. And it was just incredible. This was my second advance week, my second kind of international team camp. So what they do is they bring together all of their trail athletes. So Salomon has a team of 20 global athletes in trail running. We've got 10 women and 10 men. This year was exceptionally cool because we also brought the para team and the road running team, and kind of, running is running. So it was really cool to have athletes who perform the act of running in different ways. And, we were there to kind of kick off the season. So for me, I'm coming from a summer in Australia, so I've been racing and training a lot. But for a lot of these athletes, they live in the mountains and are enduring a winter. So it's kind of take the skis off, put the runners on, and spend some time together. We also do like a lot of product development, meet the staff, go to the Annecy headquarters, and kind of dream up different concepts of products and our race schedules and projects and stuff. And then a day in the life there is intense. When you bring together the world's best athletes, a good day is good and a bad day is very obvious. So it's a very awesome environment. The Salomon team is very welcoming. And it made me walk away and go, I've got some things to work on. These are the things I'm doing well. And you really realize that these athletes that I idolize and I follow online and are my teammates, they're all human and they all have, thoughts and pressures and feelings and ups and downs. And to be with them, to navigate those day to day and to spend 2 weeks together, it's really inspiring to me and shapes the athlete that I want to become for the following season.
I want to go back to the beginning. I think a lot of our listeners are familiar with your origin story of running. You got into ultras by running your first 100K alongside your dad, Ash, at the age of 16. And when you graduated high school, you made the unconventional but rather bold choice to pursue running as a career rather than go to college. And back then, becoming a pro trail runner just wasn't a thing in Australia and even in other parts of the world. Now, on the one hand, it sounds like a dream. You're getting paid by a major sports brand to do the thing that you're passionate about, but it really couldn't have been easy. What was it like entering the sport so young with obligations to perform and having all of these pressures on social media?
Yeah, it was really interesting, looking back on how everything unfolded and the domino effect of everything. I really believe that everything happens for a reason. And, in school, people were like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And as we developed and got older and started to finish high school, a lot of my friends had the answer to that. It was like, I want to be a physio. These are the steps. This is the university. I got to get this score. And I was always just kind of like, quite frantic about it and was like, oh, maybe I want to be a vet. Maybe I want to be a teacher. Maybe I want to, and I just was sporadic. Every day was different. And I remember loving running. It was my one constant. And I remember my teacher vividly saying to me, like, Lucy, that's a great hobby, but it's not a job. And it's so funny because I just went back and did a talk at my school and I saw the teacher and I was like, look at me now.
That is awesome.
But yeah. And so I took that year off. Australians, we have the gap year. It's kind of, everyone seems to do it between high school and university, college. And I was a part of the Sky Running World Championship team for Australia, New Zealand, and went across the Mont Blanc Marathon. And, it was there that I saw Emily Forsberg, who I'd always just had as my screensaver on my phone. And she was just like this idol, that someone that was doing something that, yeah, like you say, this didn't exist in Australia. Definitely not. And so I ran there, I ran well, and I got taken to Annecy to talk to Salomon and at their headquarters. And I couldn't believe it. It's such a huge thing to take your passion to become your profession. It's just a totally different mind shift, or I felt like it needed to be. It kind of felt like, okay, like you got to just like drain that joy a little bit, because now you've just got to work really hard and prove that this is what you've got to be doing, that you should be doing and you deserve to be doing. So it took a little bit of getting used to. I think being so young was like an asterisk next to me for a long time. And so it was just like a good race was like, wow, she's young. But a bad race was like, oh, she's young. Like, she's just finding her feet. But as I got older and that asterisk disappeared, it was kind of like, okay, Lucy needs to prove herself to kind of like stay in the position she's in. And that's where I really started to struggle with just kind of, I felt like there was pressure internally, externally going on. And I just hadn't really felt it nor had the tools to deal with it at the time.
Okay, I would say quite a bit older than you. If I had Instagram when I was 20 or 22, there is no way that I would be doing what I'm doing right now, because there are just some things that shouldn't be online. And I know that I wouldn't have had the foresight to kind of craft a public image. Our brains aren't even fully formed. At least I've heard about this about the guys until you're in your mid 20s. So was there Instagram when you first started? How did you start to build up that online presence and realize that that was part of your career?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because a lot of athletes that are from maybe the generation before me look at what I do and they're just like, how do you do that? And you do it with such ease. And, the truth is that my generation, that was just what I was always doing. Before I was even in the trail running space, I was just like, here's what I eat. Here's what I see. Look at this. Look at my dog. Look at my family, Right. It was always kind of like just a journaling thing for me. But, I didn't realize that, of course, when you start growing that following and you've got people, at the beginning, it was like my mom, my dad, and my brothers and aunties and uncles from overseas following. But when it started to become this growing audience of people who didn't know me, and that the way that they were creating the illusion of me was connecting the dots of what I shared, was when I realized just how scary and probably inaccurate like what you share can be. And oh man, the amount of times I've been misunderstood in the way that I write, or I will say something quite blasé, not thinking through how this could be interpreted, or maybe the ramifications of something I've said, because you're just young, you're just throwing words around and maybe not sharing the full context of things. And so I really had to learn, and my dad was amazing in this, when I did slip up and there was just comments of people scrutinizing or having a go, he was kind of like, I never suffered in that in silence. He would always, still to this day, he reads every comment that's on my page. Wow. And there's now quite a lot. And he'll let it sit for a little bit, and then he'll be like, hey, did you see this comment? Like, let's talk about it. Were you in the wrong? Did you maybe say the wrong thing? Could you have worded that differently? Or is that person just a jerk? Like, there is that side of it too. And so it was especially after coming third at Western States when I was 21 in 2018. During that race overnight, I gained, 50,000 followers, and that was 50,000 people that started following me at a version of myself that was not healthy, that was not sustainable. So of course, when I had to, kind of dig myself out of that hole that I'd created, there was a lot of questions, a lot of scrutiny, a lot of articles, a lot of people connecting the dots of what's going on in her world, in her body, in her life. This is the end of Lucy Bartholomew. She'll never be what she was. That really made me take a hot minute and just be like, this network, this thing that I'm, making money on and definitely using an advantage to create contracts with brands is a very dangerous and very scary tool. So it needs to be taken very seriously. And so since then, I've been far more, people think the content's the same, but the cogs in my brain and what goes through before I do post is a completely different process to way back then.
Do you think you get more scrutiny by being a female athlete?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I feel like you're a walking target as a female, and I think that there's definitely positions in things that I've taken and men have done the same thing. And one of the biggest examples that comes to mind for me is that I put up a post about not running for the Australian running team for the World Championships because we had to pay for everything. And I was just like, I'm sorry, like it's a huge honor to run for Australia if you just pay your entry, your singlet, everything, like the whole thing was going to cost me $15,000. Wow. And I wrote out that I was not going to partake because I wanted this to change. And maybe me excluding from it would create that change. And I got thrown under the bus. They were like, this is your job, Lucy. Like, you should just balls up and do it. And a guy on the team wrote the same thing. And everyone was like, that was like, absolutely, here's your Medal of Honor for doing something so noble. And I was just like, I lost so many followers. I got so much hate. And I just couldn't believe the way that it was like heroic for one, but it was like, she's clearly trying to get something out of this and is just like, woe is me is the other option.
That I'm not surprised, but it still is crazy. The double standard that athletes, women in general, but that female athletes face in this is, what you brought up doesn't just affect women or others. It affects people who are traditionally excluded from the sport, those who might be in a disadvantaged position and not have the money to go. And so, an effort to kind of help raise awareness about the challenges that people face. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I'm glad you brought it up on the talk today. When you kind of made this shift, your friends, all of your classmates are going to college. You're off, starting this incredible career in ultra running and getting this huge following. Did your friend group change? How did it affect your personal circle?
It's such an interesting thing because I remember coming back from the gap year, going to like 18th, and everyone was like, they'd all had a gap year too. So it was really cool. We were exchanging travel stories, whatnot. And then we kind of like, we all, got together for like the 21st and they're all halfway finished their degrees. And now they're kind of like, we're all, 27, 28, nearly 30. And we're getting together and they're all like pregnant and like married. And I'm like still running. And so it's interesting. Like there's been moments where I kind of think, I'm like, wow, they're achieving so much, but they're achieving different things.
Exactly.
the cool thing is my friendship group hasn't shifted. They've been a part of this whole process. They saw it when I would run before school. They'd see it when I ran after school. They saw it when, my whole running started because at school I'd get in trouble for talking too much, and they'd be like, just run laps, Lucy, until you shut up, just keep running. And, I was just like, I'd walk into class, scream something, and then just be like, I'll go do some laps. It's all good. And I was like, that's where I got the running from. And so they've been there from that whole process. And I think they remember the teachers being like, that's a great hobby, like cute, love that you like running, but, your studies, your grades aren't that good. So I think they think it's pretty cool. So they've been really supportive, and I really value their friendship specifically, and I make a concerted effort for them to talk about non-running things, and they bring me out of this bubble that we can exist in running, where all you hear is Golden Trail, Western States, and it's just like, it's nice to talk about the other stuff in life that exists. And so I really put a lot of time and effort and energy into that.
Absolutely. I think, every ultra runner needs a core group of people to kind of keep us grounded. You can really fall into this very closed kind of circle. Now, we've talked a little bit about your dad, and I want to talk more about him, but not about how he supported you. I want to talk about how you supported him, because there's a lot on other podcasts talking about what a great support he is to you. But your dad last year got a spot in and raced Western States at the age of 61. And so he was following in your footsteps for a change. And you crewed and paced him throughout it. And I watched the film last night of that experience, and I was in tears. It was just gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, it was an intense, and it's probably, in terms of events that I've ever attended, stood on the start line, crossed finish lines, or stood supported, it was by far the most exhausting 32 hours of my life. And I think that it was, so my dad has been trying to get into Western States for, I think at that point it was like 8 or 9 years. Wow. And so when I got in 2018, I remember getting an email, Ultra Trail World Tour had given me an entry as this up and coming young Aussie. And I remember calling him and being like, Dad, I just got into Western States. And it was just like static on the other end. It was kind of like, you got in, I've been waiting years for this, and you just get an email. But I was like, you have to be there, So he came across, he crewed me and was phenomenal. There's an article written on I Run Far where they said that he was like Mufasa and I was like baby Simba, just like, running around this thing. And he was all like chest out, super proud. And so it was incredible. He then came back the following year, which was, a massive battle for both myself and I think for him to watch. And then he finally got in, and I just remember he started training the day after he got the email that he was in. He started training like a 30-year-old, like it was like new life was breathed into him. And it came at such a perfect time because I felt like, naturally he was getting older and slowing down, and there was less and less that were maybe gauging his interest. And, for anyone to commit to these races and to train and to put money and to travel and to do it, it's a huge commitment. And as you get older, that energy and time and effort to put into that is less and less. So it had to really set his heart on fire. Obviously, this was, the lottery is always in December. And we've always, every December before Christmas, we're all like deflated that Dad hasn't got in. And it's kind of like, what do we get him for Christmas if it's not a trip to America or a Western States bib? So when he got in, we were all like, okay, this is my present to you. This is my present to you. Here's some Salomon pack and water and ice bandages and whatever you need. And so it was so cool. And it was cool to watch and live with him and see him train and, give him some ideas of what I'd done in the past of good long training runs and crew some of his long training runs. And then getting him to the start line, both my brothers came across, and it was the first time that me and my siblings had been together in 10 years altogether. Tom, my middle brother, is like not a runner, and he's so refreshing to have because he just doesn't get it. He's just like, I don't really understand why you've been like 10 years committed to this thing, but if you care, I care, I'll be there. And, he's watching everyone just like deteriorate throughout the day. And he was like, people are paying to do this? Like, this is a thing. And I was like, this is a big deal, Tom. You're watching like a big deal unfold. And so I picked up Dad at Michigan Bluff. He was able to pick me up because he got there after 8 p.m. And so I paced him to Green Gate and had just like such an incredibly special time. Like, we very rarely now run together. We'll travel to runs together and start and then finish and go to a cafe and then travel home. But rarely do we put the steps in the same spot at the same time. And so for 8 hours, we just got to just go back to when he was 50 and I was 16, running along the coast of Victoria in that first 100K. And it was just so beautiful. It was like I'd done this race 3 times or started it 3 times. And I remember these sections, and I usually do it as the sun's setting. We were doing it in the pitch black. It was just a totally different experience and so beautiful. Obviously, things started to unfold. If people have seen the film, Lucy's Dad by Salomon TV, Dylan Harris, you'll understand that he was then taken off course by his next pacer. He got to the finish line and he was 2 minutes over that 30-hour cutoff. And Western States, God love that event, but they're very strict on cutoffs, and he's considered not a finisher. So he made it the loop around the track to just thousands of people cheering for him online and in person. And, it was probably the most heartbreaking thing for me to watch because I couldn't do anything. And I'm happy to suffer on my own and to put myself in those positions, but to just be a witness and to be completely hands off and to see him just like bent at 90 degrees, just like willing his body and mind to hang on for a little bit longer was, I slept the whole flight home back to Australia, 15 hours straight. The person next to me thought I was dead because I was so exhausted from this experience. And, it's really beautiful, this film coming out and Dad processing it. People come up to him before the film and they'd congratulate him, and he'd have a really hard time accepting it. He'd be like, no, I didn't finish. I didn't do it. And then the film coming out and this just overload of people being inspired and motivated and wanting to congratulate him and thank him has made him just accept that, like, as much as it was a really hard thing to experience and something that, if we had to choose how that day unfolded, probably not the way that I would write it in a storybook and a fairy tale. But these experiences and to capture it and to share it is so powerful. And he's touched so many, and that motivation and that story has come back to me so many times, even with my own running. And so, it was just kind of a really traumatic but beautiful and something that, the Bartholomews will never forget. And he may not have a buckle, but he has, so much experiences and memories and things that you can't put into a little metal thing that you wear on a belt.
Going into this, you're crewing, you're pacing your dad. He's obviously kind of helped bring you up in the sport and given you so much advice. What was your strategy going in? Were you thinking, okay, I'm going to give him the same type of help that he gives me, or I'm going to give him tough love? What was your thinking?
Yeah, well, he's always been the one to give me the tough love. And, we have this beautiful relationship of there's really no, we can just be completely honest. There is no filter going on. And sometimes it gets us into trouble with each other. And sometimes it's, it's exactly what you need to hear at the right time. And I think knowing my brothers really well, I knew that Josh, the eldest brother, he's quite an empathetic person and will be more appealing to Dad's emotions. Like, if Dad looks tired, Dad should sit down, he should rest. Tom, my middle brother, super oblivious to the whole thing that's going on, probably not super helpful, but we'll just G him up. He doesn't really know what's to come or what's going on, but he'll be there for the vibes. And what I am is I'm someone who's like, I know what you need. I know what the time says. I know what, we were working very closely to that 30-hour cutoff from very early on. So I was just like, I think I say in the film, I'm just going to give him a little push. We just need to push a little bit more. And then I was like, well, actually, I just need to give him a big kick up the ass because he really does need to start working hard. And so when I picked him up to pace him, I sat in front of him and then I sat behind him, and it was kind of like, keep up, put your feet where my feet are. When I say eat, you eat. And, I've had amazing pacers at Western States. I had Sally McRae pace me both times, 2018 and 2019. And she was like that. She was like hard ass mother, she was like, if you don't hand me that gel wrapper empty, we're going to have a problem, and I was like, I love you and I'm scared of you. So, okay. And then on the other side, I had Dakota Jones pace me, and he was more probably that emotional, like, he didn't really know me that well. So he was like kind of on eggshells around me, but I was like, I want to be the Sally. Yeah. So that was my approach was, tell it how it is and just like keep him aware and keep him alert with what's going on. Because the other thing is, and you'll see in the film, is that the pacer that I hand him over to, Matt doesn't, he's American, so he speaks miles and miles per hour. And Dad doesn't, that's not anything we talk about in Australia. And so when I was pacing him, I was able to talk about like kilometers to go. I know this track, there's the river. This is what you're going to do. We're going to hike up to Green Gate, the next checkpoint. This is what this is going to look like. It was all I could be very specific about it all. And so I think that was something that just made Dad feel comfortable. And then when we handed him off, things got uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, you see a little bit of that tough love in the film, but I actually want to talk about maybe where the tough love went away. Maybe it was when you were kind of out of the official crewing duties, because, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, but it was like, you just turned into a kid again. And there was a moment where your dad is comforting you because you are in tears and you're seeing your dad in pain and you just can't handle it. And it's so beautiful because you're crying and you're saying, Dad, and he's comforting you back. And I was just wondering what was going through your head. What was your self-talk? Were you telling yourself to snap out of it, or were you just completely overcome with emotions?
Yeah, there was no controlling any of that. I think in my mind, I was like, Lucy, you've got a camera on you, like play it cool, don't be like super red in the face and just crying and wailing. And I just had nothing to control that. And I think what it was is like when I saw Dad coming in, and when he comes in at this point in the movie, he's like totally buckled over. And I felt like I was looking at him maybe when he's 90. And I was like, I've just had like this like vortex into the future, and I'm not ready to see that. We're not there yet. We've got lots of life to live before that point. And so I think for me, it was just kind of, I was on like 2 hours of sleep because I had paced through the night, got this call that he'd gone off track, just like peeled myself off the kitchen floor where I slept that night because I was so tired, went to this checkpoint, was overwhelmed by what I saw. And then when I looked at my watch and did the math and knew what was coming and knew what it could look like, and it was just like, what was overwhelming at one point was just like overwhelmed at the next point. It was a pretty crucial part of the film that I know has brought a lot of people to tears. And it still does for me. Like I still watch it and I'm like, it was just like, everything just fell onto me, and I felt like I was shouldering it, which I had no responsibility for, but it was just, I knew how much this meant to him.
Yeah. And, you said when you were describing it that you had to be hands off, but when he's coming into that final stretch on the track and, he's gone over the 30-hour time limit, he's completely bent over. You can see you're struggling because you keep trying to want to actually physically carry him, but you have to pull yourself back. It's really sweet to watch. There was something else your dad said, aside from the race, just about trail running that I thought was really poignant. He said that running makes it easy to have difficult conversations or conversations about topics that you wouldn't normally have. And when he was talking about you guys, he said, we can talk about anything on the trail. We talked about when Lucy got her first period, when she started having boyfriends. And it's easier to talk about because you don't have to answer the question right away, because you might have to catch your breath. And I was thinking about that and just how true that is, that you can kind of get out stuff on the trail internally or with a friend much more easily than you can sitting at a coffee shop. And also because you don't have to make eye contact. It gives that level of separation that kind of makes you feel more comfortable and in exposing vulnerability.
100%. All the conversations that I guess, you see in movies or you would kind of expect to be over like a dinner table where you're looking that person in the eye and it's a very serious, talking about like your school results or whatever, or fights with friends, or, you see it constantly when you go running with someone and it just suddenly that barrier is broken and you just start talking about stuff that you wouldn't talk with a therapist or a really close friend because the intimidation factor is just not there. When I run some running camps and I bring together people from all walks of life and they have the one thing they share in common is maybe they run and they follow me and that's how they knew about this thing. And by the end of it, the damn wall is broken and it's reciprocated. And that's what I think I was able to speak about my stuff, but also it was reversed, but not in a way that was like, here, I'm going to burden you with all of this. It was just kind of like, let me in and I'll let you in. And that kind of like, that balance was there where it was like, okay, you're not just asking for everything from me. You're going to give me something back and just really tighten that bond, which was, it's why we're as strong as we are in our relationship.
It's kind of hard to be precious about anything really when you're pooping next to someone in the woods, right?
Yeah. When your dad's standing guard while you take a poop on the trail, you're at a different level of openness.
So I want to shift to talk about mindset, because you're someone who's known for being super positive. Has it always come naturally to you, or is it something that you kind of proactively employ as a strategy because it works, or is it both?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think, going back to that first 100K and even previous to that, when I kind of was dabbling in this sport, you had to believe that this was worth your time and energy and sacrifices, and to be called a bit of the weird one to be doing it. And then, naturally, you've got to remain pretty optimistic in these things. And you start to see it as you ride out these roller coasters. These highs, they don't last. The valleys, they don't last. So if you can just be pretty neutral and just be very curious and very vanilla about it all, like don't get too emotionally wound up, that's your best and safest and most efficient bet. And so I think, the people I've surrounded myself with, my dad, but also just the people in the sport, have all kind of taught me lessons and tools that I bring to myself. But in saying that, there has been so many times in races where or even in training and even for prolonged training blocks, where I'm just like, I'm scrolling social media and seeing inspirational things from other people. And I'm just like, I just don't get it. Like, I want to feel that. I want to be that optimistic about things and that motivated and do the stretching and the strength and eat well and blah, 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 and get up at 5 a.m. and, win the morning, win the day. And it's just not that. And I think kind of understanding that that's how everyone feels, and that, again, social media is this completely warped unreality of everything. And so I do have it in me, like it's very much, that's like my default. But there are times where it feels overwhelming and I've got to be like, Lucy, you have your effort and your attitude right now. So you need to focus on those two things. The effort that you put into changing this situation. Do you need to eat? Do you need to take a nap? What can you do to help yourself? And then your attitude, because you being a little bitch about it, you complaining and crying and getting angry is just wasted emotion. So just like zip it, and you've chosen this. This is your choice to be out here. You've put yourself in it. Now you're going to get yourself out. And I think that the more that I've kind of encountered those situations and come out the other side, and usually it's come out and I've been like, oh, it wasn't that bad. And you're just like, yeah, you've just got to give it time, and you've just got to give yourself a little bit of grace out there. And so I just take that forward, and I take it in my running, and I take it in my just everyday living, is just, control what you can control. Everything else, put your hands in the air, because it's going to be a wild ride.
So you use the tough love in your own self-talk.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was coached previously by David Roach, who amazing coach, and he is incredible with the affirmations and the love. But what I started to realize is that I respond really well to just complete honesty, complete like black and white, tell me how it is. And I think that, there's a time and a place. And when he took me on kind of after that trough after Western States in 2019, I needed that. I needed to be pat on the back, told, you're really good, you're amazing just for being here, like just starting a run is a win. But when I'm trying to make this a profession and find my best and my potential, I needed to find someone who was a bit more kind of like, that was good, but it wasn't great. This is how we're going to improve. This is what we're going to do, like a little bit more clear cut. And so I think that I can seek out, my mom will give me the emotional, lovey-dovey, fluffy stuff if I need it. And she's who I'll go to. But it's very rare that I'd be like, hey, Mom, can I just have like a little pep talk from you? Because, usually what I get from Dad and from the people that I surround myself with, which is more like, pull your socks up, get out there, try your best. Doing something's better than nothing, and then move on, because probably tomorrow will be a completely different day.
And you're with Jason Coop now, is that right?
I am, yeah. So you don't get more blunt than that.
No. Do you know, I finished, it was Hard Rock 2022. The two of us kind of ran the last bit together, which was so much fun. But I can sense that is a part of his vibe. He's very much no bullshit, and let's get this going.
Yeah, I just had a terrible race at Black Canyon in February, and he was there. He got to witness the whole thing. He was a part of my crew. And, at the end, when I was probably expecting a message of like a little bit lovey-dovey, like fluffy, it wasn't your day, but, your day will come. And all I got was, sometimes we don't get the race we want, but the race we need. Now we know where we're at. And I was like, oh my God, can you just give me a hug?
I first met Coop. It was actually during Western States 2017 when I ran it. And I threw up for the last 70 miles of the race. So I wasn't having a good time. And I came up on Casey, who, was the previous winner. And I came up where she was just sitting at the river, just completely done. And I think Coop had tried every trick in the book to get her out of the chair. And I offered her some chicken McNuggets, which she rejected. And then I just kind of grabbed her hand. It was one of the years where the river was too high to cross. So we had boats. And I grabbed her hand and I said, no, come on, we're getting in the boat. She said, oh, I don't have a light. And I was like, I've got a spare one. And I threw a light on her, grabbed her hand, and I just yanked her into that boat. And after that, it was so nice to talk to Coop, because he said, sometimes you need that trigger, you need that thing that will just give you a kick up the backside. And he was having trouble finding it. And for some reason, I was Casey's kick.
That is one of my favorite stories I've ever heard. One, because I freaking love Casey, and she's been a part of all the Western States training camps that I've done. And she's always been that person for me. If I'm in my own head, she's like, Lucy, get out of there. Like, let's just be here and now. And for you to be that for her, and like how much I respect you, I'm just like, this sport and the women in it is unreal. It's just like, that's so cool. I love that.
I'm still disappointed she didn't eat the chicken McNuggets, but anyway, I know my it's different.
That would have been her solution for sure.
And I think, there's actually a parallel there with you guys, because you both had such incredible Western States performances, and then you had the pressure of coming back to Western States with all of those expectations, which can be so hard to deal with, which is a good segue into the next topic. We could talk for, like I said, hours about your accomplishments, but I want to talk about the challenges and the setbacks, because, I think it's important for people to know that elites, we see them as invincible, and you guys aren't. You're human. You have all of the same issues and setbacks that normal human beings have. So you've mentioned in the past, your trajectory. You had this huge year in 2017, winning ITRA Trail Australia, getting third in Western States in 2018. And then in 2019, you completely imploded. Your words, not mine. What happened? What was going through your head, your body? What was happening in life?
Yeah, so to take it back, in the lead up to 2018 Western States, no, let's take it back further. In 2017, at the end of the year, I'd raced Ultra Trail Tarawera, Ultra Trail Australia, Ultra Trail Cape Town, and TDS, and had podium results, top 5 in all of them. And at the end of the year, I said, I think I'm going to race like shorter distances. I think maybe I'll do a year of sub-ultra even. It was starting, sky running was starting to get kind of some legs and momentum. And then I got the almighty email that I'd gotten into Western States. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm like doubling my distance. I'm going further than I've ever gone before. And, I got that email and I remember thinking, this is a huge privilege. I obviously had seen my dad trying to get into this race. I've heard all about it. I've watched Unbreakable, that I can quote it word for word. I can't believe I get a bib at this spot, at this race. And so I was like, I'm going to leave no stone unturned and I'm going to put everything into this. And my personality, especially in the past, has always been all in or not in. And you'd see that in kind of like my diet with going like, I'm either vegan or I'll go the other way. Or with coffee, it's like I drink heaps of it or I won't drink any of it. Alcohol, and that's like in my family, it's a known thing. And so, it helps me and it hinders me as an athlete. It's a good thing in some cases and it can be bad. And so in training for Western States, I was just training so hard and I was doing so much. And knowingly or unknowingly, I was losing weight as I was doing it. And I was doing it at an unsustainable, but it was all like, I'm just doing this till June 24th. And then on June 24th, once this race is over, I'll sort everything out. My cycle stopped. It's fine. Till June, it's fine. And so I was just kind of like, that was my mentality. And, I was doing everything and anything my coach said, and then I was doing a little bit more. I then raced Western States, led the race for 85 kilometers, then got passed by Courtney DeWalter, Caitlin Gerben, held on for third place and finished. And, that was meant to be the finish line of this whole saga. I was then meant to like sort myself out. Unfortunately, what happens in these cases is I was so addicted to feeling that fit and to feeling that good. And it really, Western States, whether I believe it or not, I didn't really feel like it knocked me around that much. I went to Mexico and I like surfed and sat on a beach for a bit after it. Then I went to Ecuador and climbed Chimborazo. Then I went to Hard Rock and did the soft rock over 3 days. Then I did Trans Rockies, flew home via Asia, did a 100K race there, flew back to Australia, did a 100K race there. I should have, and most normal people, would you run Western States, you come third, just sit on that, Lucy. Like that is plenty, and that is something that is highly regarded, and you can build a career off that result alone. But I was like getting opportunities, and I didn't know how to say no, and I was just traveling and doing everything and anything because my mindset was like, maybe this will all disappear tomorrow. So say yes now, travel, do it. You're not coming up with any injuries. Your body's holding up pretty well. But for me, my body has never cracked. I've never had, touch wood, like a stress fracture or anything. But what cracks for me is my mentality. And so I think my mind cracks first. And it's the first kind of whisper or warning bell of like, if you push us too far, we will roll you an ankle. We will break you because you need to stop. So the end of the year came, and it came to that same date that the emails go out for who gets in for the next year. And I was like, okay, this is when I started training in 2018. 2017 for 2018. I got to start training now for next year. And I've got to do more than what I did because that got me third place. More will get me first. And from the get-go, every training run that I tried to replicate, every race that I stood on the start line to compare to last year just went terribly. And I was just hating it, but I was grinding through it. I was like completely optimistic, but it was all fake and phony. And I just started my body just was like, if you're not going to stop, we'll stop for you. And we will do what we need to do to survive and to allow you to maybe do this in the future. And that required me, putting weight back on, especially as a female, putting that fat back on, getting that percentage up, getting my cycle back. And I was just a completely different looking athlete. I was the athlete I was always meant to be, but now I wasn't something that I just tried to squeeze into a different box. So kind of going through that, I stood on the start line in 2019, just completely overtrained, completely uncomfortable in what I looked like, who I was, didn't really want to be there, felt guilty that I didn't want to be there because everyone has been like fighting for a spot there.
Yeah.
At the same time, like everyone's like, well, you know, if she can get third on debut, she's clearly going to be second or first this time. And I remember in 2018, I was the first to the top of the escarpment. And in 2019, I was probably 40th to the top of the escarpment. And I just mentally just unraveled out there. How I kept going is purely my dad until Forest Hill, Sally McRae until the finish line, and my brother who paced me. I was just like, just do it for these people. But I crossed the finish line, and I, you know, still to this day, in terms of like times in the sport or things that I not regret, but I'm kind of like disappointed in the way I acted. I should have never stood on that start line. You know, I was just trying to convince myself that, you know, that optimism that I have is that like, it'll get better. It'll get better. Once you start, it'll feel good. Okay. It'll get better when you get to Robinson Flat, to Forest Hill, to the river, just get to your paces, get to that finish line. And then luckily for me is that after that COVID hit, and that was, you know, a blessing in disguise for myself. I know obviously as a world and a society, it was horrendous, but it stopped racing. It stopped me traveling. It brought me back to home. It made me sit down and say, Lucy, if you're not a runner, who the hell are you? Because you're currently chasing your tail and you're never going to catch it, and you're never going to be what you were unless you're willing to sacrifice too much, and it's just not worth it. So it was a pretty hectic time, and something that, you know, I speak a lot to the athletes who do really well at Western States, like Kat Bradley, and she won Western States, and then it's a really long fall from there. And I think people sometimes don't realize that there's a lot that goes in, and there's a lot of a battle afterwards. And it's something that I feel like is not spoken about enough.
I think you're completely right that we actually haven't paid enough attention to how much pressure there is, again, specifically on females, on young women, where you do so well, particularly at Western States. And then the fall after is huge. And it's actually quite helpful, I think, for you that you've got your brain, your mental state to act as that, you know, canary in the mine shaft, so to speak. That's probably what's helped you, you know, prevent all of these injuries.
Oh, totally. You know, there's so many things that they work the way they do, and they've helped me so much. And I'm so grateful for the people around me, what I've got going on inside of me, but also, you know, I push against the limit, I fall off the edge, I crawl back up, and then I'm like, all right, you got to write down what worked, what didn't. You got to learn from this, because the most disrespectful thing you can do to this life experience is just completely not take anything away from it. And so for me, it's like that journaling, that writing down, that talking to people, doing podcasts. Like, I love people kind of like, let's go back to that experience, you know? And I'm like, oh no, I'm done with that. You know, but it's so important, because it makes me, you know, all those memories come back, all those tools that I pulled out of that. I'm like, yes, this is what I did learn. It wasn't a wasted opportunity. It wasn't a failure, because I can speak about it now, and maybe someone listens to this and actually goes, oh, I'm guilty of that. And they stop before they do the fall that I took.
Yeah. And, you know, it's good to have a sense of humor about it. You mentioned Black Canyons. This was a 100K race you did in February. You came in 23rd woman, which is really good, but it's not a Lucy finish. You know, I loved your, you know, quote unquote race report. You used one of my favorite drawings, and it's, you know, the drawing of a horse where the first third is supposed to represent the training, and it's very detailed and just perfect. And then the second third is showing what your plan is, and it's a little bit less perfect, less detailed. And then the last third is the execution. And it's just a stick drawing of, you know, one leg of the horse and this little, very, cartoonish smiley face. And you put it out there on Instagram and said, yep, this was Black Canyons. Any questions? And I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, it was, I sent that to Jason Coop, my coach, and he took a little bit to find the humor in it. once we did, it was good. I think it was cathartic for us both.
Now, you're a proponent of doing the basics well and kind of the simplicity of ultra running. I think it was in the film that they made on Lara Pinta, which was the 230K trail that you ran in 2021 in the Northern Territory, where you said, left foot, right foot, tell me when to start and stop, and I'll meet you there. Or it was on another podcast. I wrote it down. It was a good quote. But even the basics, can go wrong. And no matter how experienced you are, sometimes you can just get carried away and throw them out the window. And actually in Lara Pinta, that happened. You were going for it on this incredible trail, in harsh terrain. I mean, the Northern Territory is no joke, but you hit a section where you just miscalculated the water and you managed to get through it. But I was watching you on that film, and when you got up to your crew, your lips were black. I mean, you were in a bad place. What is it that, with all of the experience that you have, and you're not the only one, where something happens and we just forget about those basics, no matter how important they are?
Yeah, I mean, so Lara Pinta was just pure, just unknown. I hadn't done the homework. To take on something in those environments, you need to have wrecked the course. I hadn't been on the course. You need to have like a good nutrition plan. I didn't have a nutrition plan. I was just like, I just got to keep eating, and as long as I'm eating, it's good. I had two guys who were not runners. And so they were content creators, and they were like, oh, this is great footage. And I'm like watching it back, and I was like, did you not think that maybe we should can this thing when you saw me coming out with black lips and swollen and absolutely fried? Like, my dad was on the phone to one of them, and they kind of said, yeah, she's kind of ran out of water, but when we get her, we'll give her some water. She'll be sweet. And Dad's like, if they'd FaceTimed me and I'd seen you, I would have been like, get my daughter off that trail. She is like, that is an IV. Yeah. Their solution was like, we've got cold coconut water on ice. And I was like, great. Like, can you just inject that into my veins at this point? So that was kind of like, and that film, it's a cool film, but it's also like, that is just so unsafe, and it's something that I don't want to promote the sport of running. Big asterisk next to that. That's not what running should look like. It's not how a project should unfold. It was dumb. It was unsafe. There were so many things I would do differently. Black Canyon, on the other hand, was just unreal. I trained so well to that race. I was so fit. I was so excited. I traveled early. I stayed in, just got immersed into to the Arizona community, the Tucson. Absolutely loved it. And then here's me on social media scrolling along, reading how people are now, women are taking in 90 to 100 grams of carbs an hour. And I was like, I reckon I'm probably doing 70. Okay, I'm just going to do 90. I'll do 90 for race day. More is more. More will make me go faster. I've been doing this for 10 years. And here I am being just a bit more drink mix in, another gel. And from the get-go, in super cold conditions, at altitude, on my period, in the mud, with the world's best, I'm just chugging back calories. And my body was just big fat red button, evacuate. We cannot take this in. And it just made me think I was able to, I ran with Abby Hall, who paced me, and she just watched me vomit and run at the same time, because I was just my body is fine. It's my guts. That's my limiting factor. And that's just so frustrating, because I can run at a 5-minute K, but I just got to vomit to the side, and then we'll get through it. And when I finished, it made me think of how, if I'm going to do that as an elite runner who has nutrition sponsors and people telling me what I should be doing, I've done the testing, done the lactate, should know my carbohydrates, whatever, other people must just be taking anyone's advice and just going and doing it, and then just being cool, what works for her is going to work for me. What the shoes you wear is what I'm going to wear. And it just made me think, just be really, really careful. What you read, take it with a big dump of salt, because, it's so easy to get sucked into thinking more is more. What works for you will work for me. And I just couldn't believe that race went down the dunny, because I was silly enough to think that what Keely Henninger does is what Lucy Bartholomew should be doing. So yeah, I was like suitably embarrassed by the whole thing, because I trained so well and I had big expectations. I was looking for a golden ticket to Western States again. And I ended up, just, leaving bits of spring energy gels along the Black Canyon Trail and just watering the cactuses out there. Like, unreal.
But it is hard to sift through the noise. And I think it's pretty much human nature. You're standing on the start line, you're looking at everyone else and kind of sizing up, whatever they're wearing or whatever they're doing. I'm not doing that. And to assume that whatever you've come in with is a lesser strategy. The one kind of last, really meaty question I'm dying to ask you. You've talked about how important the why is, when we're out there, when you're training, when you're racing, when you're going for any big challenge. Has your why changed over the years, or has it stayed pretty constant?
No, I think my why has ebbed and flowed. I think when I think back to when I started, it was to spend time with my dad. It was to go on camping trips, to see Australia, to spend that quality time. Then it was kind of like, that was broadened to the gap year, where I just wanted to see the world and I wanted to take on some races that I'd followed online. And then, signed a contract, got a brand, got Salomon's support. And it was kind of like, okay, I think the one consistent why for me has been the community. I've always said, and I said this to Salomon at this camp that I was just on, and I said, I could take a leave racing. Like, I don't run to race. There's athletes that do that and love them. Good on them. I would run every day of my life if I never stood on a start line again, because I don't really run to find the fastest, the most competitive, to compare myself to someone else. I run to see and to meet people and to experience things. And it's led a lot by curiosity more than like competition or comparison. I've always had community around me. When I was 16, I had people signing my permission slip to do races, and they'd be my guardian and run next to me. And then I've always had traveling. I went to the Salomon Junior Academy and I met a lot of people there. And Salomon's always been this family that's, wherever I land in the world, there's someone who runs for this brand, which is just incredible. It's probably come full circle, where it's kind of like back to being about, I've got this platform on social media. I love storytelling. I love making films like Mind and Sport about Black Canyon, the Lara Pinta. I love just sharing my experiences, because I'm willing to go to the ends of the earth and to put myself in super uncomfortable situations and do something that maybe no one believes of, because to believe it, you have to see it. And that's what, when I was younger, I didn't think that this was a profession because no one was doing it. So now I want to be loud about it. So the young girls are like, but she's doing it. I want to dream and believe that I can do that too. That's my big why purpose now, is more like, what can I do to help those behind me, rather than trying to get to the front so that I can have that position.
Well, that's awesome, because that'll serve you well, through injuries, through, dare I say, old age. Okay, before we end, I've got some quick fire questions for you. These are just some more simple than others, but and some have come from the listeners. So I'm just going to start rattling through them. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. First one. This came from the listeners. What do you eat during races?
Well, that's a great question, because I'm still figuring it out. I still have PTSD on spring energy. It coming out my nose at Black Canyon was a real low for me. So I currently work with The Feed, which is now just like a distributing company of all different nutrition. So I'm just at the moment pick and mixing, which is really fun. But when I know, I'll be sharing what I'll be doing, but not what you should copy.
Okay, if you could name the university degree that you've gotten from ultra running, what would it be called?
Oh, the degree in patience, I think, is what I've learned. Yeah, a big school of patience going on those trails. Yeah.
Okay, this one also came from a listener. Would you ever do more road races?
Yeah, totally. I love just sports. I love being outside. I love running. The other day I did my whole workout on the track and everyone thought I was absolutely bonkers. But I just love it. I love trail running offers me to switch off my brain. Track running gives me this like rhythm. Road running, it gives me that like, I don't know, there's something I love about it. And so I think that there's so much beauty, especially spending time with the Salomon Road team. I just have this deep respect after watching them kind of finesse and sharpen their tools and their craft. I'm kind of intrigued by that because I go training and, I go walking and eating a slice of pizza and that's called training. And they go and do 10 by 1K. And I'm like, oh, okay, we're very different athletes. Okay.
Okay, what do you think is the biggest mistake that young athletes getting into the sport are making?
I think that there is trail running and ultra running seem to be getting intertwined a little bit too much. I love the Golden Trail series and sky running, just those, 20, 30K, full gas, very entertaining to watch. I think that that's kind of where you should begin, just the way I did that jumping into 100Ks, it takes a lot on your body and you have to be, if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, it's going to take a lot out of you. So I just think that building up slowly, there's time, this life is long and the trails are long and you can get there at some point, but you don't have to do it now. Yeah.
That's good advice. Now, where can people find you online, Lucy, if there is anyone listening who isn't already following you online?
Yeah, so for sure the best place to follow me is Instagram, so Lucy_Bartholomew. I'm on Facebook, but it literally just copies across. I don't open that app. I'm on Strava if people really want to see the walking and eating of pizza that goes on. And that's it. They're my two spots.
Well, we are here for it, and I'm so excited. I just wish you the best prep. And I'll continue to follow along with your progress. Thanks everyone for listening. That was Trail Talks. Grateful if you could give us a rating and let us know how we're doing, but only if you love it, of course. If not, just slide into our DMs and give us the negative feedback there. Just kidding. If anyone has a good witty sign off for me, I would also be super appreciative, or I will start experimenting it. No one wants that. See you next time, everyone.